Panerai at times has struggled to please the enthusiast community in recent years, at least in part due to the brand's tendency towards larger case sizes. In this video though, I'll be taking a look at a newer 42mm watch from the brand that pairs their unmistakable design elements with a more wearable package with the Panerai Submersible PAM01068. But how does this one stack up to the other Panerais, and can Panerai actually go further with this downsizing in the case? Let's jump into it. And before we jump into this video, if you want more things Panerai, because this is going to be focused mostly on the submersible, we have a complete look at Panerai, the brand, understanding the different collections, the Luminor, the Radiomir, Submersible, the Due collection, and also key references underneath each of those umbrellas. So if you want that, more understanding of their history, design philosophy, and a lot more, check out the link in the description down below. So compared to some brands with an overwhelming number of collections, Panerai is usually identified by a pair of recognized models with the Luminor and the Radiomir, both stemming from Panerai's collaboration with the Italian Navy or the Marine Militare starting in World War II. We have looked at these watches in the past on the channel, however, sitting third overall for the brand in terms of popularity has to be the Submersible. It serves as Panerai's modern purpose-built professional dive watch, with the formula having been inspired by the prototype reference, the 6152-1 from 1955 that paired the already established Luminor format with a novel polycarbonate rotating timing bezel that could be removed if needed. The modern concept of the Submersible, originally unveiled back in 1998, opts for a more traditional steel rotating bezel that is more rigidly affixed to the watch, but it's very clear to see where that visual design inspiration comes from. Since its introduction, the Submersible collection has, as is often the case with Panerai, spawned dozens of different variants, with a common theme among them being the larger wearing experience that is as much of a part of Panerai's DNA as the crown locking device or a sandwich dial. Yet with recent trends leaning towards smaller watches and more vintage-inspired dimension sets, Panerai's diving-specific collection lacked an option for anyone seeking more manageable sizing while still upholding the attributes of a proper dive watch, specifically the water resistance. A few years ago, that all changed with Panerai unveiling a pair of new 42mm submersible references, bringing this collection squarely into the wheelhouse of a lot more enthusiasts while keeping the essential Panerai submersible design DNA. As a note, Panerai has certainly done smaller watches before, with case sizes all the way down to 38mm, but in almost every case, the smaller Panerais were heavily targeted towards women and sacrificed some water resistance in the process, in effect losing the diving capability and heritage that inspired the brand as a whole. The model we're taking a look at here today though is the PAM01068, aka the Blue Note, and was released in 2021, combining the smaller 42mm submersible format with a professional diving spec, a charming blue color scheme, and a stainless steel bracelet, though we also have a rubber strap on hand for comparison because, you know, this is a Panerai after all. Now, starting with this watch's biggest move, the wearing experience. We have a smaller case diameter of 42mm paired with a reasonable thickness of 13.1mm and a still longer 51.5mm lug to lug. The weird reality with wearing a Panerai is that going into putting one of their watches on the wrist, you almost have a different set of standards to judge how it wears given the imposing stature most will have. This watch is certainly larger, although it is such a far departure from the typical standard of the Radiomir and the Luminors that I have worn in the past. As a result of the broader lug to lug and the crown lock, this watch wears probably still like a 42.5mm to a 43mm case, though it's not a perfect representation given the square cushion case. The strange pairing for this reference here is that this submersible comes with a bracelet, and some less familiar with Panerai might be questioning, why is that such a big deal? Well, simply put, Panerai is not known for pairing a metal bracelet with their watches, instead building their acclaim by way of their stellar rubber straps. The bracelet has an end link that does add some presence, but thankfully is downswept. The links for the bracelet are unconventional, featuring one small polished center link surrounded by an unconventional semicircle H-link design, tapering from 22mm at the lugs, at 20mm at that butterfly style clasp that lacks any form of micro adjustment but does feature two half links for fine tuning the fit, and all the links are screw adjusted. Given that this is theoretically a professional diving watch, it is a bit odd to see a total lack of extension in the bracelet design, but for the free thinkers that don't want the automatic accepted norms of the brand, it is perfectly fine. Yet it is more polarizing compared to the well-done rubber straps, and would probably be the option that I would go for my wrist preference, because it does make the watch considerably less of a substantial presence on the wrist. Now, the case is completely brushed with a prominent bezel with a matte blue ceramic insert offset by polished circular indices and a polished coin edge. It's worth noting that these smaller circular indices look cool, having been styled after the prototype 61521, but are much harder to actually read or use in a diving or timing scenario since they all look virtually the same. At 3, we have what is perhaps Panerai's most central design pillar with the prominent locking crown design. In this execution, the crown does not screw down, but is rather pressed into the case and its gasket with a lever that must be opened for winding or setting purposes, while still ensuring that this watch can maintain a water resistance rating of 300 meters. Compared to much of the rest of this design, the dial here is a bit more straightforward, pairing the lume circular and pill-shaped indices applied over a striking blue sunray central surface. At 9, we have a small seconds register that mimics the broader dial, with standard timekeeping being managed by a pair of skeletonized pencil hands. As is often the case with Panerai, the dial lacks a precise minute track, making more exact setting an issue at times. Dial text is minimal, with only Panerai Submersible at noon and automatic along with the depth rating at 6. While not necessarily class leading, the lume on this submersible is well done, shining with the incandescent nature you'd hope to see from a watch with the Luminor's glowing heritage. Turning the submersible over, we have a relatively simple screw down case back with Panerai's engraved logo demonstrating 2 divers on their mini sub, but underneath that closed case back, we have what Panerai calls their P900 caliber that is unfortunately hidden behind the closed case back. Equipped with a 4 Hz beat rate, shock protection, and comprised of 171 components, this caliber's single biggest move is going to be its 3-day power reserve. Enhanced levels of over-the-weekend reserve have become a major selling point across the industry in recent years. At this price of around $10,000, it is definitely not maybe the best position movement in the price range. Don't have a COSC certified movement or any crazy anti-magnetic tech, especially in a watch of this type of luxurious positioning. It probably would have been nice to see some of that. So this P900 caliber is claimed to be an upgraded version of a caliber produced for Panerai by Richemont's movement manufacturing arm in Val Fourier. At some point around 2019, Panerai made this shift to this naming convention of the P900. This entire situation is a bit murky. However, there is no question that the movement absolutely does its job while offering some solid power reserve in the process. We did test the accuracy of this example across 5 different positions, and with that it was running between +7 to +10 seconds per day. In terms of general operation here, you're looking at 28,800 vibrations per hour, 4 Hertz. It does feature hand winding and hacking stopping the second hand when you pull the crown to the farthest position, and a power reserve of 72 hours. So now to unpack looking at this Panerai Submersible, a couple things that come to mind. And the reason why I wanted to review this watch was twofold. I definitely want to talk about this watch as just an individual product, but then I also wanted to speak about the larger idea around Panerai. So first is to discuss this watch in general. I do think that this is, for me, my favorite collection from Panerai, and also I think is the collection that can be played around with the most. It seems that many of the Paneristas and people that have just such a huge affinity for the brand are a little bit more open, as well as Panerai themselves, in trying to use the submersible as a test for maybe some ideas that they wanted to implement across their entire collection. And that's kind of what I feel when I handle some of these submersibles. And I think 42 millimeters for a Panerai versus in front of any other watch brand is a very different idea. I find this watch perfectly wearable. Now, where some of the challenges come in with this watch, and we can talk about this, the bigger idea of Panerai, I think just comes down to where it's positioned in the market. You're talking about $10,000 for this watch. I think it's a very nice watch. I think it looks cool. I like this blue tone. I think they really nailed the blue of this. But the bezel action, I think it leaves something to be desired. I also, when dealing with the movement, I think it's now becoming a little bit behind. I think one of the challenges with Panerai right now is you are going to be compared to your contemporaries. And when it comes to watches like a Rolex Submariner, which is priced right around this at retail, you have the Omega Seamaster Diver 300, which is going to be priced significantly less for this. You have the Tudor Black Bay, which you can get pretty much 3 of those for the price of one of these. That now I think makes this a bit more challenging for many consumers. But I think the reason why I wanted to look at the submersible a little bit more detail is because I think it's the perfect kind of test collection to try to figure out more things that what can get that future Panerai buyer in. Now, the one thing that they do is they do have this Luminor locking system with the crown that's become such an identifiable characteristic for Panerai. But could Panerai go smaller with this? Could they drop that and go for a more traditional radiomere crown on submersible? How would that look? And how would buyers maybe respond to it? Could Panerai go further in this direction? Are there other things that they can do? Because as of right now, they basically have seen two different things. They've made watches that are completely for the traditional Panerai buyer, and then they've made watches that I don't even think that non-Panerai buyers would want. They're watches that are either made very targeted towards women, or they're watches that are a shell of what I think make Panerai special, which is this diving watch DNA that also have kind of this macho characteristic to them that I think people would like. But is there a happy medium between these two ideas where you can still uphold like this water resistance rating, keeping this brand DNA while still maybe making something more appealing to consumers outside of your inner circle? I don't know, but if I had to guess one line in collection that could do it, it would probably be the Submersible. This model specifically is not going to probably be the one that's going to do it, but I think this is at least on the right track. And I think 42 millimeters, if maybe a little bit smaller, but mostly it's just playing off this design DNA where how can we find a sweet spot where both the enthusiasts of the brand as well as people that have never looked at the brand can find a place to come together and say, hey, that's pretty cool. But all right, guys, that is my take looking at this Panerai Submersible and just the entire collection and talking about this greater idea of Panerai. As somebody from Italian descent, I think Panerai is a pretty fascinating brand, and I'd love to see comments down below. What do you think about some of these questions of where can Panerai continue to go to try to hit that sweet spot? If you're somebody that's never looked at Panerai before, what would get your attention? Or if you're somebody that is a huge lover of Panerai, how would you maybe recommend the brand proceed when it comes to changing things? Because I think many people would agree that they have to maybe change up the mix a bit to start to just change ways that people look at the brand and get new consumers that aren't just those crazy devotees that have just loved the brand for years. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.